The Harrington estate stood on a sprawling 200-acre property, its Gothic spires reaching toward a slate-grey sky. Snow drifted gently onto the manicured lawns, the flakes shimmering in the twinkling lights that had been strung for the Christmas season. This estate was in upstate New York, far from the clamor of Manhattan, but still close enough for the private helicopter to land on its helipad whenever the need arose. Here lived Jared Harrington, a billionaire known for his ruthless business tactics and flamboyant lifestyle. Born with neither wealth nor status, Jared had fought, negotiated, and strategized his way to the top of the e-commerce world. His net worth had soared past $5 billion thanks to Harrington Industries, an umbrella corporation spanning everything from shipping logistics to renewable energy. Despite the hush that fell upon the estate during winter, the interior was anything but tranquil. A swirl of holiday preparations consumed the staff. Bouquets of white roses in crystal vases were placed throughout the halls, velvet ribbons draped over antique banisters, and the glow of countless candles gave an aura of old-world enchantment. All of this had been overseen meticulously by Jared's wife, Catherine Harrington. Catherine was the epitome of grace. Elegant, poised, and charitable, she was the kind of woman who could navigate a charity gala or a high-stakes negotiation with the same composed smile. She had known heartbreak as a child. Her parents died in an accident when she was only 10 and had been raised by her grandmother in a humble New England cottage. Through her exceptional intelligence and relentless drive, she'd earned a scholarship to a prestigious university where she met Jared. Back in their college days, Jared had not yet amassed his fortune. He was a fiery upstart, ever eager to pitch a new idea or gather classmates for brainstorming sessions. Catherine was the studious one, rarely out of the library, except when Jared convinced her to attend entrepreneurial club meetings. Slowly, the synergy between them grew. He had the boldness, she had the calm intellect. They fell in love between worn textbooks and late-night cups of coffee. But the years had changed both of them. The success of Harrington Industries came quickly, and with it arrived a world of opulence that neither Catherine nor Jared fully knew how to handle. Catherine poured her energy into philanthropy, building schools in underprivileged areas, funding scholarship programs, and hosting lavish charity balls at the estate. Jared, however, became addicted to the thrill of conquest mergers, acquisitions, high-stakes deals, and the presence of ever-new admirers. It was a few days before Christmas, and snow was piling in ankle-deep drifts around the estate's perimeter. Inside, a large pine tree dominated the foyer, bedecked in silver tinsel and studded with ornaments reminiscent of a winter starfield. This year, Catherine was determined to make the Harrington Christmas party the most unforgettable event yet. They were expecting a crowd of celebrities, business titans, philanthropic luminaries, and even a few cameo appearances by high-profile figures. She had once mentioned in passing that Elon Musk might drop by for a philanthropic panel, though she never confirmed. In truth, Catherine's mind was weighed down by more than just event logistics. She had sensed for some time that her marriage was in jeopardy. Jared's dismissive attitude, constant travel, and the unspoken tension that settled between them like a silent occupant in their bedroom. They had grown more distant in the past year than in the entirety of their marriage before. She told herself it was just a rough patch. Billionaires led stressful lives. But late at night, doubts gnawed at her. Could it be more than just the stress? Could there be someone else? One of Catherine's oldest friends, Celeste Farnsworth, was also staying at the estate. Celeste was a socialite of modest means, though you'd never guess that if you saw the way she commanded a room. She and Catherine had met in college as well, though Celeste's studies didn't last long. She found the social side of life far more compelling than any pursuit of a degree. Over the years, Celeste had drifted in and out of Catherine's life, always returning whenever Catherine needed a confidant or whenever Celeste found herself in financial dire straits. A soft snowfall continued outside, as though the world itself wanted to veil the secrets simmering within the Harrington mansion. The final touches for the party were underway, and Catherine observed the staff erect a sculpted ice angel in the courtyard. The figure was regal, but the cold countenance of the frozen angel only amplified the chill Catherine felt creeping into her own heart. Little did she know, the flurry of betrayal and heartbreak was already in motion. This year's Christmas would be unlike any other. It would be a turning point. The seeds of tragedy were being planted under the sparkling lights and sumptuous decorations, and at the core of it all was an unspoken plan that Catherine herself had set in motion, half in desperation, half in fear. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the estate was awash in a spectral glow. It was the evening before the annual Christmas party, and Catherine prowled the corridors, making sure each guest room was fully stocked with plush towels, fresh flowers, and handwritten welcome notes. She wanted everything to be perfect, even though an unsettling intuition told her that something was already slipping beyond her control. While she was inspecting a guest suite, Catherine heard the distant rumble of Jared's Lamborghini pulling into the driveway. She glanced at her watch. 7:45 p.m. He was hours later than she'd expected. Telling herself that he must have been delayed by business, she smoothed her hair and went downstairs. She reached the grand foyer just as Jared entered, flanked by his personal assistant and 2 advisors, all of them engaged in animated conversation. He looked polished in a tailored navy suit, the kind of man whose presence demanded admiration. Yet Catherine's practiced eyes picked up the tiny details. The weariness in his gaze, the faint tremor in his voice, signs of a deep internal strain he tried so hard to hide. "Darling," she greeted, forcing a warm smile as she moved toward him. Jared nodded to dismiss his entourage, then turned to Catherine. "Hey," he said simply, letting out a small sigh. It was the kind of casual greeting that might pass for normal in public, but Catherine felt the coldness. He didn't lean in for a kiss, didn't ask about her day. Instead, he looked past her, at the towering Christmas tree. "Looks extravagant," he commented, voice tight with fatigue. "We went all out this year," Catherine replied, fighting the pang in her chest. "I thought you'd like it. We have so many high-profile guests coming." He nodded absently, already scrolling through notifications on his phone. "I'll be in the study if you need me. I have a conference call with investors in Hong Kong." Just like that, he strode away, leaving Catherine to stare after him. Her hands clenched involuntarily, nails pressing half-moons into her palms. Once, the holidays had been her favorite time of year. They had shared silly traditions, like ugly sweater nights and gingerbread house competitions. Now, those traditions lay dormant, overshadowed by the weight of expectation and the chasm that had grown between them. She walked to the study door, quietly peering through the crack. Jared was already speaking in clipped tones. "No, I don't care about the negotiations until I see the final terms. If we can't secure a controlling interest, I'll kill the deal, plain and simple." Hearing his commanding voice felt like a blow to her chest. Here was the man she had fallen for, confident, bold, unstoppable, but she missed the vulnerable side, the one that had once held her through nights of self-doubt, the man who read poetry with her under starlit skies. That side of Jared had seemingly vanished. Turning away, she headed toward the drawing room, where Celeste sipped a glass of Merlot by the fireplace. A lush arrangement of poinsettias sat near the mantel, reflecting Catherine's love for classic holiday decor. Celeste, all shimmering gold hair and sultry poise, glanced up with a small smile. "He's busy, I take it?" Celeste asked, swirling her wineglass. Catherine nodded, sinking into a velvet armchair. "Very. Something about a new acquisition in Asia." "Of course." Celeste pursed her lips. "He never stops, does he? Even at Christmas time." "I used to admire that in him," Catherine admitted. "His drive, his ambition. He used to call me his rock, the calm to his storm. I don't even know what we are to each other anymore." Celeste reached over and gave Catherine's hand a gentle squeeze. "You're under a lot of pressure right now. Maybe it's the season. Maybe it's just a temporary slump." Catherine sighed. "Maybe." Then she changed the subject, voice hushed. "I'm glad you're here with me. It's been ages since we caught up in person." Celeste's eyes flickered with an emotion Catherine couldn't name. Regret. Longing. "I'm glad to be here too, and you know I'm always on your side, Catherine." They chatted for a while about the upcoming party, the decorations, the guest list. Celeste's easy banter put Catherine somewhat at ease. However, an undercurrent of tension hovered in the air. Celeste's presence, so comforting on one hand, also introduced a disquieting element that Catherine couldn't quite articulate. As the fire crackled, Catherine remembered an envelope she'd hidden in her walk-in closet earlier that day. It contained documents that might very well unravel her life with Jared. She hadn't told Celeste or anyone else yet. The guilt of secrecy ate at her, but so did the fear of what the future might hold. "If you'll excuse me, I need to do a final check on the party arrangements," Catherine said at last, rising from the armchair. Celeste nodded graciously. "Take your time." On her way out, Catherine paused at the threshold. She glanced over her shoulder and noticed Celeste's expression, a curious mixture of pity and something like anticipation. Maybe she was just imagining it. Yet Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that Celeste, who had always been an excellent reader of people, knew there was more going on than met the eye. The next day dawned crisp and bright. Morning light reflected off the freshly fallen snow, bathing the estate in a radiant glow. A swirl of staff circulated through the halls, setting out polished silverware for the party, erecting miniature Christmas trees in every corner and ensuring that the garnet velvet tablecloths were impeccably ironed. Jared, up since before dawn, was consumed in phone calls. Catherine caught fleeting glimpses of him on the phone in the solarium, on a video conference in the library, barking orders in the courtyard as a catering truck arrived. She busied herself with hosting duties, trying not to let her emotions show. By late afternoon, guests began to trickle in. Some arrived by chauffeured limousine, others by their own sports cars or SUVs with tinted windows. The staff escorted them to their rooms, took their coats, and offered trays of mulled wine or hot cocoa. Laughter and conversation filtered through the mansion, a festive tapestry of voices that belied the quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. In the midst of this, Celeste glided gracefully through the crowd, her emerald dress catching the light, her laughter tinged with just enough flirtation to draw eyes wherever she went. Catherine, observant hostess, that she was picked up on the fact that Celeste spent more time around Jared than might be considered appropriate for a mere friend. She noticed them in the library, heads tilted closer than necessary, or in the grand hall, their arms brushing in a way that sent a spark of jealousy through Catherine's veins. A part of Catherine whispered that she was simply overthinking. Celeste was a naturally flirtatious woman. It was part of her charm. And Jared, for all his aloofness, was a magnet for admiration. Nonetheless, Catherine sensed something more, a magnetic current that pulled them together, intangible yet unmistakable. Some time after sunset, the real party began. Fairy lights decorated the perimeter of the garden, creating a fairy tale-like walkway leading to a massive heated tent for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Inside the manor, a jazz quartet played softly by the fireplace, and a second group of musicians tuned up near the dining hall. Guests mingled, exchanging business cards, discussing global market fluctuations, and complimenting Catherine on her impeccable taste. It was during this swirl of socializing that Catherine caught Celeste and Jared at the far end of the corridor leading to the trophy room. She couldn't hear their conversation, but the intimate tilt of their heads, the gentle laugh that Celeste gave, sent a chill racing down Catherine's spine. When Jared caught Catherine's eye from across the corridor, he quickly took a step back from Celeste. Celeste, in turn, looked away, as though caught in a moment that should have remained private. With her heart pounding, Catherine turned and walked swiftly down the hall. She could feel heat rising to her cheeks, an ugly jealousy that fought with her customary composure. She had no interest in causing a scene, especially not on such a crucial night. But the sight of them together unsettled her deeply. She found temporary refuge in the powder room, dabbing her face with a cold cloth, forcing herself to breathe steadily. "Stop imagining things," she scolded herself internally. "You have a perfect evening to host. Keep it together." Emerging a few minutes later, she nearly bumped into Celeste, who was standing just outside with a concerned expression. "Catherine, I'm sorry," Celeste said, eyes wide. "I didn't mean to pry or anything. Jared had asked me a business question. You know I have a few connections in London, and he was curious about a shipping route." Catherine raised a hand, mustering a smile. "It's fine. I'm not upset, truly." Celeste bit her lip. "If there's any way I've made you uncomfortable—" "You haven't," Catherine lied smoothly. "Thank you for being so helpful. It's just, there's been a lot on my mind recently." Celeste nodded, relief evident on her face. Then she looked around and leaned in. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "You've seemed a bit tense these past couple of days." Catherine hesitated. For a fleeting moment, she considered telling Celeste everything about the documents hidden in her closet, about the doubts gnawing at her heart, about the suspicion she could no longer deny. But no, there was a reason she hadn't told anyone yet. "I'm just overwhelmed," Catherine said at length. "I want tonight to be perfect." Celeste placed a reassuring hand on Catherine's arm. "It will be. Let me handle some of the guests. You should take a moment for yourself. You've done enough running around." "Thank you," Catherine whispered, touched by her friend's apparent kindness. Yet as Catherine watched Celeste glide back into the stream of well-dressed partygoers, she couldn't fully banish the dread that coiled in her stomach. Something was off, and the next few days would confirm her worst fears or banish them, once and for all. By 11 o'clock, the Harrington Christmas party was in full swing. The mansion's corridors teemed with chatter and the clinking of champagne flutes. On a raised dais in the main ballroom, the jazz ensemble had moved on from soft standards to spirited holiday tunes, luring guests onto the marble dance floor. The air was thick with pine, mulled cider, and the subtle hum of clandestine deals being murmured in corners. Catherine, ever the consummate hostess, circled from group to group, ensuring that each guest felt welcome. She laughed politely at jokes, accepted compliments on the decor, and responded graciously to every business inquiry. But her eyes kept drifting toward Jared, his tall figure in a charcoal suit, the crisp line of his shoulders, his expression revealing little but a certain tension around his mouth. He spent much of the evening engaged in hushed conversations with top investors and corporate partners. Catherine's philanthropic circles, meanwhile, clamoured for her attention, praising her for raising funds for various charities. These philanthropic obligations had once been a source of unity between her and Jared. Now they felt like separate worlds. Around midnight, a hush fell over the ballroom as the orchestra paused its music. The lead violinist tapped her bow on the microphone stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we have a special tradition at the Harrington Mansion each Christmas Eve. Would everyone kindly make their way toward the grand foyer for a reading of the holiday toast?" Catherine forced a smile and turned toward the foyer, guiding a handful of guests along. Jared was already there, standing near an enormous sprig of mistletoe that dangled from a chandelier. The chandelier itself was a family heirloom so old that legend had it Catherine's great-great-grandfather had brought it over from a Tuscan villa. Jared lifted a glass of champagne, and the room hushed in anticipation. Catherine took her place beside him, trying not to notice Celeste's presence just a few feet away. "Thank you all for coming," Jared began, his voice resonant, honed by countless boardroom presentations. "This year, Harrington Industries has reached greater heights than ever before, and while the pursuit of success is exhilarating, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the people who truly matter: our friends, our family, our community. My wife, Catherine, has led philanthropic efforts that inspire us all, and I hope that every partnership and friendship we celebrate here tonight grows even stronger in the coming year." A wave of polite applause followed. Catherine glanced at him, a flush of unexpected pride warming her cheeks. She couldn't recall the last time Jared had praised her so openly. Raising her own glass, Catherine tried to steady her voice. "Thank you, Jared. And to everyone here, thank you for being a part of our holiday celebration. May the spirit of generosity and kindness endure long after the Christmas lights are taken down." A soft chorus of "Hear, hear" ensued, and the group sipped their champagne. Then a playful voice piped up from the crowd, "Kiss under the mistletoe." Everyone turned their gaze to Jared and Catherine, standing directly beneath the sprig of greenery. A ripple of amusement swept through the foyer. Catherine's heart fluttered in her chest. She tilted her face toward Jared, searching his eyes. For a moment, it seemed as though he might decline. The tension in his jaw was evident. Then, perhaps feeling the crowd's expectant gaze, he leaned in and brushed a chaste kiss on Catherine's lips. The applause was immediate, though polite. Catherine forced another smile, her pulse still fluttering. The crowd dispersed back toward the ballroom, but as Catherine moved to follow, she noticed that Jared lingered in place, finishing his champagne with a single gulp. She felt a pang of hurt. Even a simple kiss felt forced, a performance for the public. Celeste emerged from the departing guests, wearing a knowing smile. She slid her arm lightly around Jared's waist, in a gesture that might have been construed as friendly. But Catherine caught it. She saw the way Jared's hand briefly touched Celeste's elbow in a gesture of familiarity. Jealousy flared hot in Catherine's stomach. She told herself to remain calm, to breathe. The night wasn't over, and she was determined to keep her composure until the last guest had departed. It was around 2 a.m. when the crowd finally began to thin. Limousines snaked down the driveway, carrying partygoers back to their hotels or to the next glamorous after-party. Some guests, staying overnight, retreated to their rooms. Eventually, the staff started tidying up the remnants of the lavish affair. Catherine excused herself to her private quarters, exhausted and on edge. She slipped off her heels and placed them by the vanity, exhaling a shaky breath. Then she remembered. She needed to lock away some important documents, the same ones she had hidden in the closet. Crossing the bedroom, she opened the hidden compartment in the wall behind a row of evening gowns. Inside lay an accordion folder stuffed with legal forms. They were divorce papers, ones she had quietly begun assembling, uncertain if she'd ever have the courage to file them. But day by day, as Jared seemed more distant, more cold, the idea of parting ways had become less unthinkable. Her hand hovered over the folder, her heart pounding. Did she have the strength to go through with it? The thought of leaving, losing everything she'd built with Jared, weighed her down like an anchor. Yet staying in a loveless or unfaithful marriage was just as unbearable. Before she could close the hidden panel, Catherine's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her purse and saw a text message from one of the staff. "Mrs. Harrington urgent. You might want to come to the library." Fear clenched in her throat. She hurried down the hall, ignoring the stabbing pain in her feet from hours in high heels. The library doors were slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she pushed them open. Inside, the scene that greeted her froze her blood. Jared and Celeste were standing near the fireplace, locked in an intimate embrace. Celeste's arms were around Jared's neck, their bodies pressed close. They sprang apart at the sound of the door, but it was too late. Catherine had seen enough. A swirl of emotions, rage, betrayal, humiliation threatened to overwhelm her. She steadied herself against the doorframe, her breath ragged. Jared stared at her, eyes wide, shock and something that resembled guilt etched into his expression. Celeste touched her lips, her face paling. Catherine's voice emerged in a furious whisper. What is this?" Neither of them spoke immediately. Finally, Jared cleared his throat. "Catherine, it's not what it looks like." That line would have been comical if the moment weren't so devastating. Catherine's hands shook. She sensed the staff member who had texted her standing discreetly behind her, but she didn't care who witnessed this. Celeste took a tentative step forward. "Catherine, please, let me explain." "Explain?" Catherine hissed, her voice cracking. She pressed a hand to her chest, as though to steady the frenzied beat of her heart. I saw exactly what happened. 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind. The sleepless nights, the lonely dinners, the forced smiles during public events. She had harbored suspicions, but never wanted to believe them. Now the truth was laid bare, and it shattered her illusions in one merciless instant. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not show weakness. Glaring at Jared, she forced her voice to remain steady. I want you out of this house, both of you. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving them both standing in the aftermath of her anguish. Catherine spent the remainder of the night locked in her suite. She ignored Jared's frantic knocking and Celeste's text messages, ignoring everything except her own emotional turmoil. Around dawn, she finally drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by images of Jared and Celeste entwined by the fireplace. When she awoke, the estate was eerily quiet. The holiday magic that had permeated the halls for the party seemed to have dissipated, leaving only the cold reality of betrayal. Her phone showed multiple missed calls and messages from Jared, each increasingly urgent. "Catherine, please let me explain. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll be in my study whenever you're ready to talk." She tossed the phone aside, tears threatening again. Then, recalling the divorce papers hidden in her closet, she felt a grim sense of resolve. She had suspected infidelity, but witnessing it changed everything. Summoning her courage, she dressed in a simple black sweater and trousers, pulled her hair back in a tight chignon, and made her way downstairs. She found Jared alone in the study, pacing by the large bay windows. Snow still blanketed the world outside, a stark white hush that seemed to mock the chaos within. Jared looked up as she entered, relief briefly washing over his features. "Catherine," he began, stepping toward her. She raised a hand, halting him. "Don't. I'm only here to talk about practicalities, who's leaving, and how this is going to play out." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I never meant for this to happen," he said, voice subdued. She wanted to scream at him, to throw the nearest crystal decanter. Instead, she maintained a stoic facade. "Then tell me what you did mean to happen." He let out a shaky exhale. "I've been under a lot of pressure. The deals, the expansions. I felt lonely. And Celeste, she was here, and it just—" "Don't!" Catherine snapped, her voice like ice. "I don't need an excuse." He hung his head. "I'm so sorry." Catherine locked eyes with him, her gaze reflecting years of love turned sour. "Where is she?" "She left early this morning," Jared replied. "I told her it was best if she went to a hotel in the city." A bitter laugh escaped Catherine's lips. "How noble of you." They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words pressing down like a physical force. Eventually, Catherine spoke, her voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "It's over, Jared. Our marriage. Whatever this has become." He swallowed hard. "Let's not rush into anything. You know what's at stake, our assets, our reputation. We can figure this out." A flash of anger lit her eyes. "You think I care about the optics of a divorce more than my self-respect?" She reached into her handbag, retrieving an envelope. "I've already drawn up papers." His face blanched. "You... what?" She tossed the envelope onto the mahogany desk. "I couldn't stand how distant you'd become. I suspected you were cheating, and now I know. These papers aren't filed yet, but I'll do it if you give me any reason not to believe this marriage can be saved." He stared at the envelope, then back at her, anguish in his expression. "Catherine, we have a life together." "We had a life together," she corrected, voice brittle. "Right now, I need you to stay away from me. I'll have my lawyer contact you in the morning." She turned on her heel, but paused before exiting. Part of her wanted to ask him if he ever truly loved her, if there was anything left to salvage. But pride stopped her. She left him alone in the study, the door closing with a decisive click behind her. The presence of secrets. In the days that followed, the Harrington estate underwent a transformation as dramatic as a scene shift in a play. Many of the holiday decorations were removed prematurely, the once joyful halls now stripped to a stark minimalism. Some staff quietly resigned, unwilling to serve in the midst of such palpable tension. Those who remained did so out of loyalty to Catherine or a lack of alternatives. Jared took up residence in a corner suite on the opposite end of the mansion, effectively exiling himself while still refusing to leave the property entirely. Catherine busied herself with charity follow-ups, ignoring him at every turn. The rumour mill churned, though in hushed tones. A few tabloids even picked up on the tension, publishing headlines like "Trouble in Paradise," "Inside the Harrington Estates Holiday Scandal." Yet, Catherine's carefully orchestrated public relations efforts managed to keep the worst of it under wraps. For the moment, the public knew only that Catherine and Jared were spending time apart for personal reasons. Privately, Catherine gathered her legal team, forging ahead with divorce proceedings. She knew the battle would be massive, dividing properties, stocks, philanthropic foundations, and brand partnerships. Jared had billions to protect, but Catherine had carefully documented her entitlements. One late afternoon, as Catherine sorted through a stack of paperwork in her private sitting room, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a text from Celeste. Against her better judgment, she opened it. "Catherine, please, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to explain. I never meant to hurt you. Can we meet somewhere neutral? Coffee shop? Anywhere." Catherine's hand shook with anger. She typed a curt reply. "Don't ever contact me again." And with that, she blocked Celeste's number. Little did Catherine know that across the mansion, Jared was drafting a plan of his own. He had discovered the depth of Catherine's legal preparation, the quiet alliances she'd formed with top attorneys. Fear clutched at him, not just for his finances, but for the empire he had built. Divorce threatened to tear apart the carefully curated image that had won him so many lucrative partnerships. Worse, he was beginning to realize what life might look like without Catherine, without her steady presence, her sharp mind, her unwavering devotion. Too late, regret gnawed at him. But some lines, once crossed, could never be fully erased. Christmas Day arrived with none of the usual warmth. The estate lay still, the fresh snow glistening in the early light. Catherine spent the morning alone, sipping tea in the winter garden. This used to be her favorite day of the year, waking up to exchange gifts with Jared, then driving into the city to volunteer at the soup kitchen together. Now everything felt hollow. Around noon she rose to leave the garden, intending to finalize some legal documents. The moment she stepped inside, she nearly collided with Jared in the corridor. He wore a somber expression, dressed in a simple sweater and slacks instead of his usual tailored suit. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. "I have nothing to say," Catherine replied, trying to sidestep him. He gently caught her arm. "Please, just a few minutes." Against her better judgment, she allowed him to guide her into a small lounge just off the main hall. This was the same room where, years ago, they had celebrated their first Christmas in the mansion, where he had surprised her with a diamond necklace, presenting it as a symbol of their prosperous future. The memory now felt tainted. They sat opposite each other on antique chairs, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Jared took a breath. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," he began, "but I want you to understand. This thing with Celeste, it was stupid, a lapse in judgment." Catherine fixed him with a cold stare. "A lapse in judgment that lasted how long?" He hesitated. "A few weeks." Her chest tightened. She fought back tears. "And you never thought to end it?" "I was conflicted," he said, anguish coloring his tone. "I've felt distant from you, Catherine. With the business expansions and all your philanthropy, we hardly saw each other. I felt neglected, like I'd become just a business partner to you." Anger flared in her eyes. "And so you turned to my friend? It wasn't planned." Jared's voice rose, then he caught himself, lowering it again. "Celeste was here, flirting, and I was weak." Catherine let out a trembling breath. "You betrayed me, and you humiliated me. I've been so worried about you, about us, thinking you were just stressed. I had no idea that you were doing that with her." He looked at her, desperation in his eyes. "I'm begging you, let's not end things like this. Let me prove I can be better. I'll move out if you want, but please don't go through with the divorce yet. Give me a chance to fix this." She shook her head, tears finally spilling over. "I don't know if I have it in me to forgive you. You've shown me exactly where I stand in your priorities." A strained silence followed, broken only by the soft ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Eventually, Catherine rose to her feet. "You said your piece, Jared," she managed, voice trembling. "But you don't get to decide how this story ends anymore. I do." With that, she turned and left him alone, the echoes of a Christmas past resonating in the room. Over the next few days, the Harrington estate became a battleground. Catherine's lawyers and Jared's legal team flooded each other with demands and counter-demands. The dividing of assets loomed. Outside, the snowstorms grew fiercer, as though nature itself mirrored the turbulence within those mansion walls. Media speculation simmered. Tabloids speculated on a scandal. Gossip columns hinted at betrayal. Despite Catherine's best efforts, rumors of an affair with Celeste began to spread. Jared, meanwhile, felt his world closing in. He held desperate meetings, pleading with Catherine not to file the final documents. He offered significant concessions, control of certain charities, even partial stake in Harrington Industries. Yet, Catherine's resolve only hardened. In a final, desperate act, Jared made a public statement, implying that he and Catherine were reconciling. Perhaps he hoped the PR spin would force Catherine to reconsider, or at least buy him time. In truth, it only enraged her further. Late one afternoon, as the wind whipped snow against the mansion's windows, Celeste Farnsworth unexpectedly arrived at the estate. The staff, uncertain how to react, informed Catherine of her presence. "Send her away," Catherine snapped. But Celeste refused to leave, standing resolute at the front door in a thick overcoat. "Please," she told the house manager, "tell Catherine I won't leave until I speak with her." At last, Catherine relented, meeting Celeste in a small sitting room near the entrance. The tension was electric as they faced each other, the memory of Celeste in Jared's arms an unspoken wedge between them. "I'm sorry," Celeste began, voice quivering. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I never wanted to hurt you." Catherine's eyes flashed with anger. "Well, you did. Congratulations." Celeste stared at the floor. "Jared and it was never real love. It was excitement, an escape. I've hated myself every day since it happened." Catherine clenched her fists. "You threw away our friendship for a cheap thrill." Celeste's lower lip trembled. "I know. I was jealous of you, Catherine. You had the perfect life, wealth, influence, a husband who seemed larger than life. I was envious, and I made a terrible mistake." A flicker of sympathy crossed Catherine's face, but it was swiftly replaced by steely resolve. "What do you want from me now? Absolution?" Celeste shook her head. "No, I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm leaving town, going back to London to start over, but I couldn't leave without at least telling you I'm sorry." Catherine studied her former friend, taking in the tear-filled eyes, the aura of shame. For a moment, she saw the naive girl she'd met in college, the one who was always chasing excitement but never quite finding contentment. A sigh escaped Catherine. "You're right, I don't believe you. But if there's any sincerity in your words, then go. Don't contact me again." Celeste nodded, tears finally spilling over. She turned to leave, then paused, eyes lingering on Catherine. "I hope you find some peace," she whispered. Catherine said nothing. She watched Celeste go, the door closing behind her with an ominous thud. A day later, the storm worsened, blanketing the estate in a thick layer of snow. Most of the staff had gone home early, leaving only a skeleton crew. Catherine remained in her suite, going over final paperwork for the divorce. Tomorrow she would sign the documents and formally file them. Sometime after dusk, She realized she hadn't eaten and ventured downstairs to find a meal. The mansion felt ghostly, silent corridors lit by the occasional sconce, windows rattling under the wind's force. A feeling of unease crept over her. She turned a corner and nearly collided with Jared. He looked disheveled, eyes bloodshot, as though he hadn't slept in days. "Catherine," he said hoarsely, "we need to talk." She bristled. "Haven't we said it all already?" "Not everything," he murmured, stepping closer. "Please." She noticed a glint in his eyes that unsettled her. Was it desperation? Despair? Guilt? Regardless, she turned on her heel. "I'm going to the kitchen. If you want to talk, do it there." They walked in tense silence until they reached the large industrial-style kitchen. At this time of night, it was empty except for a single cook, who quickly excused himself upon seeing them. Catherine moved to the kettle, filling it with water to make tea. "I won't fight you on the divorce anymore," Jared began, voice quiet. "I know you've made up your mind." Catherine froze, the kettle in her hand. This was the first time he'd openly acknowledged her resolve. "All right," he exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "I just want you to know that I never planned this. I never wanted to hurt you. My ambition got in the way of everything, our marriage, our happiness." Catherine's throat tightened. "You could have told me you felt neglected. You could have asked for therapy or time away together. Instead, you chose the worst possible betrayal." His eyes brimmed with regret. "I know," he said softly. "If I could take it back, I would." Steam began to hiss from the kettle. Catherine placed it on the stove, turning on the burner. In the sudden hush, the weight of unspoken words pressed in. Jared swallowed, tears threatening to fall. "I've lost you, haven't I?" She turned to face him, arms folded. "Yes," she said, voice barely above a whisper. A moment later, the kettle shrieked. The sound made them both jump. Catherine quickly turned off the heat, but her nerves were rattled. Something about the storm outside, the quiet gloom of the house, made the situation feel like a scene from a tragic opera. They stared at each other, neither speaking. Then Jared took a step back, nodding as if accepting a final verdict. "I'm sorry," he said once more, voice hollow. Without waiting for her to respond, he turned and left the kitchen, footsteps echoing in the corridor. Night deepened. Outside, the snow raged in near-blizzard conditions. Catherine, feeling restless, decided to clear her head in the solarium, a glass-walled conservatory on the estate's east side. She wrapped herself in a thick coat and ventured there, drawn by the quiet hush of drifting snow. She slid open the glass door and stepped onto a small balcony overlooking the frozen gardens. The wind stung her cheeks, but she savored the cold clarity it brought. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the swirl of snow envelop her senses. She didn't hear Jared approach until he was right behind her. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, concern in his voice. She turned sharply, her coat whipping in the gust. "I just needed air. Is that a crime?" He stepped closer, arms crossed against the cold. "It's dangerous out here with the storm. You should come inside." She gave a mirthless laugh. "Why do you care?" He flinched at her harsh tone. "Catherine." But she wasn't done. The anger, heartbreak, and regret that she had bottled up exploded in a torrent of words. "You ruined everything, Jared. We had a life, a partnership, maybe even happiness once, and you threw it all away for a cheap affair." He looked at her, eyes brimming with tears. "I know, and I'll regret it until the day I die." A powerful gust slammed into them, rattling the glass walls. The balcony, slick with ice, seemed precarious. Catherine staggered, and Jared instinctively reached out to steady her. "Don't touch me!" she screamed, jerking away. The sudden movement caused her foot to slip on the icy surface. She gasped, arms flailing for balance. Time slowed. Jared lunged forward, trying to grab her coat, but the momentum carried her backward. Catherine felt a gut-wrenching lurch as she tumbled, striking the balcony's low railing. She let out a startled cry as her body tipped over the edge. For one surreal moment, Catherine was in mid-air, the swirling snow around her like a white vortex. Then she landed hard on the icy ground below, pain exploding through her body. Jared's scream echoed from above. Disoriented, Catherine tried to move, but her vision blurred. Something warm trickled down her forehead, shock coursing through her veins. She heard Jared frantically calling her name, the sound hollow in the howling wind. When Catherine opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital bed. Stark fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the antiseptic smell burned her nose. A nurse bustled nearby, checking her IV. "You gave us quite a scare," the nurse said gently. "You took a nasty fall." Catherine winced, trying to recall the events. Flashes of memory returned. The snowstorm, the balcony, Jared's horrified face as she slipped. She struggled to speak. "What happened?" "You fractured 2 ribs and broke your arm," the nurse explained. "You also suffered a concussion, but you're going to recover." Catherine tried to sit up, pain rippling through her torso. "Jared?" The nurse's gaze softened. "He's been here constantly since they brought you in. He didn't leave your side for the first 48 hours. I finally convinced him to go home and rest, but he'll be back soon, I'm sure." A surge of conflicting emotions swept through Catherine. Anger, betrayal, gratitude that he'd stayed. She sank back against the pillows, tears slipping down her cheeks as the nurse quietly left the room to give her some privacy. Days passed, each filled with a blur of hospital procedures, medication schedules, and painful physical therapy sessions. Catherine learned that her fall had nearly been fatal. Had she landed differently, or had help arrived any later, she might not have survived. Jared came every day, bringing flowers, reading the newspapers to her, and apologizing incessantly. He kept his distance physically, as though afraid to touch her without permission. She allowed him to remain, mostly because she felt too weak to ask him to leave. Eventually, her doctor announced that she was stable enough to be discharged. Through all this, the looming issue of divorce remained unspoken between them. Catherine's lawyers suggested they postpone filing until she had fully recovered. Jared's team for once did not protest. 3 weeks later, Catherine was back at the estate, convalescing in a private suite outfitted with medical equipment. The holiday decorations were gone, replaced by the starkness of winter's end. An air of solemnity hung around the mansion, as if it too grieved for what had been lost. One afternoon, Catherine managed to walk slowly to the solarium with the help of a cane. She settled on a chaise lounge by the windows, wearing a blanket around her shoulders. Her injuries ached, but the fresh air helped clear her mind. She heard Jared's footsteps before she saw him. Turning, she found him standing a few feet away, face etched with worry. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. She sighed, shifting on the chaise. "Hurts, but it's getting better." He nodded, stepping closer. "I was thinking, maybe you'd like to go somewhere warmer once you're able. A short trip to the Mediterranean, perhaps?" She gave a humorless laugh. "A vacation won't fix what's broken, Jared." He dipped his head. "I know, but maybe it would help you heal. That's all I want now, for you to heal." She looked at him for a long moment, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "What about you?" His eyes flickered. "What about me?" She gestured vaguely. "Your ambitions, your companies, your acquisitions, the life you were so immersed in that you forgot me." He swallowed hard. "I've stepped back from some deals. I put a pause on the Hong Kong expansion. My attorneys are overseeing day-to-day operations for Harrington Industries." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Because I realized none of it matters if I don't have you, and I don't mean that as a manipulation. If you still want to leave me, I won't fight the divorce anymore. But I can't pretend I care about the business when I nearly lost you, when I might still lose you." A tightness gripped Catherine's chest. She was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "You tore my heart apart," she finally said. "Seeing you with her, I can't just forget that." He nodded, tears glistening. "I don't expect you to. I just want to prove I can be better, even if it's too late for us." They lapsed into silence, the weight of regret resting between them. Outside, the grey skies churned. Catherine's body still throbbed with pain, but inside her, another ache stirred, an ache for what they'd lost. The weeks stretched into a month, then 2. Slowly, Catherine regained her mobility. She could walk without the cane, the cast on her arm replaced by a brace. Meanwhile, the estate remained quiet, as though waiting for her decision. One evening, Catherine requested a meeting with Jared in the library. It was the same room where she had discovered him and Celeste entwined, but it also held countless memories of their shared successes, laughter, and late-night brainstorming sessions. She sat by the fireplace, the legal documents spread out on a low table. Jared arrived, hands trembling slightly. "Catherine?" She took a deep breath. "I'm filing them." A flash of pain flickered across his face. "I see. But," she continued, swallowing hard, "I want to try something first. A separation agreement, not a final divorce. We can live apart for 6 months legally. During that time we'll reassess. If you still want to try, and if I can find it in myself to forgive you, we'll see if there's anything left worth saving. If not, we finalize the divorce." He blinked, clearly unprepared for this compromise. "Are you sure that's what you want?" She nodded, even though tears stung her eyes. "I need time to heal, emotionally and physically. I need time to see if I can ever trust you again." Jared's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "I know this can't be easy for you." She handed him the papers. "Sign them. We'll arrange separate living spaces. I'll stay here for now. You can go to your penthouse in the city. We'll keep minimal contact unless necessary. After 6 months we'll decide." He took the pen, eyes downcast, and signed. The scratch of pen on paper felt like a weight being lifted, yet also like the death knell of the marriage they once knew. When he was done, Catherine took the documents and stood. "I'll have my lawyer file these tomorrow." He rose as well, hesitating before he said, "Take care of yourself." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You too." He left, the door closing softly behind him. Catherine stared into the flickering flames in the fireplace, her thoughts a maelstrom of sorrow, anger, and a faint, flickering hope. Winter yielded to spring, the snow melting into the estate's grounds, revealing patches of dormant grass. Catherine stayed at the mansion, focusing on her recovery and her philanthropic endeavors. In the months that followed, she discovered a reservoir of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She took a more active role in her charities, even traveled to oversee the construction of a new school in a low-income neighborhood once her doctor cleared her for short trips. Jared, meanwhile, withdrew from the public eye. He moved to his penthouse in Manhattan, downsizing some of his corporate commitments. Occasionally, Catherine heard updates through the business grapevine. He was rumored to be more subdued, cautious, even kind in negotiations. The tabloids eventually moved on to other scandals. In time, the name Harrington was mentioned only in the context of philanthropic events or business expansions, without the salacious innuendo that had once surrounded the estate. Catherine and Jared spoke only a handful of times, mostly through their attorneys or brief polite phone calls about shared responsibilities. Each conversation was a delicate balance of civility and underlying tension. As the 6-month separation drew close to its end, Catherine found herself torn between finalizing the divorce and giving Jared another chance. Her heart ached for the love that once was, yet she couldn't easily forget the betrayal. Standing on the balcony where her life had nearly ended, she gazed at the gardens below. The flowers were blooming again, renewal was possible. But was it possible for her marriage? She closed her eyes, remembering the nights Jared had held her when she was anxious or afraid. She remembered the first Christmas they spent in that very mansion, dancing under the mistletoe to a scratchy holiday record. She remembered his sincerity, his laughter, his unwavering belief in their future. And then she remembered the image of him and Celeste by the fireplace, locked in an embrace, shattering her world. Tears slipped down her cheeks, blending sorrow and hope. She would have to decide. On the final day of the separation, Catherine asked Jared to meet her at the mansion. She waited for him in the solarium, the same place where they'd had their confrontation, the same place she had once found peace in the midst of chaos. He arrived in a subdued navy suit, no tie, looking both anxious and resigned. She gestured for him to sit beside her on a cushioned bench. "I've thought a lot about this," she began, voice trembling slightly. "About what you did, and about what we once had." He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm still hurt, Jared," she continued. "I still don't know if I can fully trust you again. But I also remember the man I married, the one who believed in building an empire, not just for profit, but to leave a positive mark on the world. I remember the early days, when you were my partner in everything." His voice caught. "I remember that too. And I want to be that man again, Catherine. I really do." She inhaled, steadying herself. "I won't ask you to sign the divorce papers today, but I'm not ready to just forgive you either. We'll try counseling. We'll see each other more, but you're not moving back in. And if at any point I feel you're not committed to rebuilding this trust, I'll finalize the divorce immediately." He reached for her hand, pausing when she stiffened, then gently grasped it. "I understand. Thank you for giving me a chance." They sat there in silence for a while, watching a soft rain patter against the glass. Outside, the horizon was veiled in mist, a metaphor for their uncertain future. The Harrington Christmas that began with festivities and splendor ended in heartbreak and tragedy, but also in the flicker of second chances. The tragedy of Catherine's fall under the swirling snow became a catalyst for both of them to confront their flaws, regrets, and longings. Neither Catherine nor Jared emerged from that winter unscathed, yet both found a glimmer of personal growth in the aftermath. In time, they might reconstruct a relationship grounded not in the illusions of perfection, but in a more sober, authentic understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. Or they might part ways forever, each forging a new path free from the shackles of betrayal. No one can say which it will be, only that life, like the seasons, moves inexorably forward. Whether the seeds of resilience planted in the ashes of their Christmas tragedy bloom into a renewed love or a dignified farewell remains a mystery. But for Catherine Harrington, the lesson was clear. True strength arises from facing painful truths head-on, from refusing to let betrayal define you. And for Jared Harrington, the lesson was equally stark. The cost of unbridled ambition can be devastating if it blinds you to what truly matters. The estate stood, as always, timeless under the changing skies. Snow would fall again the next winter, and Christmas lights would once more adorn the grand halls. Yet now, in the hush that followed tragedy, there was an unmistakable sense that something new could be built, a future shaped by honesty, empathy, and perhaps a measure of forgiveness. No matter which path they chose, Catherine and Jared carried within them the indelible mark of that fateful Christmas, a testament to the fragility of love, the destructive power of betrayal, and the unyielding resilience of the human heart. In the final reckoning, this story of a billionaire's betrayal at Christmas time and the resultant tragedies and upheavals reveals deeper truths about ambition, love, and the precarious balance of trust. Like the harsh winter storm that toppled Catherine from the balcony, life can change in an instant, shattering our assumptions about security and control. Yet, through that pain, there emerges a chance for introspection and growth. Catherine's choice to separate rather than immediately divorce illustrates the complexity of heartbreak. Rarely is it a simple yes or no, black or white. Trust, once broken, may sometimes be reclaimed, but only through consistent effort, self-awareness, and the willingness to face one's own shadows. Jared's regret underscores that success, whether in business or social standing, can never substitute for genuine emotional bonds. Even colossal wealth can't purchase redemption or undo a betrayal that cuts to the core of one's identity. Celeste's tragic role, meanwhile, is a cautionary tale about envy and the consequences of succumbing to fleeting temptations. The hollow satisfaction of a momentary liaison pales in comparison to the pain inflicted on those we once cared for and on ourselves. Ultimately, Shadows of Mistletoe offers an inspiring message about resilience, connection, and authenticity. Even in the wake of devastating mistakes, we retain the power to choose how we move forward. Whether that choice leads to renewal or closure, it's a reminder that our stories are never truly finished until we decide to close the final page. In life, as in the swirling snowstorms of a winter night, clarity often arrives only after the tempest has passed. And when the clouds part, even on the darkest winter day, a faint sun can still break through, promising that, if we persevere, tomorrow might bring the light we so desperately need. This story is a work of fiction, intended purely for entertainment. Any references to real people, places, or organizations are used fictitiously. They do not depict actual events, nor do they intend to defame any individual. This narrative contains themes of betrayal, emotional turmoil, and personal growth. Reader discretion is advised. The Harrington estate rested on 200 acres of frosted earth in the Hudson Valley, where elegant evergreens dotted the grounds and a winding driveway led to a mansion of neo-Gothic turrets and arched windows. Every Christmas, the sprawling property became a beacon of holiday grandeur, illuminated by tens of thousands of lights, filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon, and echoing with the murmur of some of the most influential figures on the East Coast. But not even the glittering chandeliers or the impeccably wrapped gifts under the 12-foot Douglas fir in the foyer could disguise the invisible cracks forming within this picture-perfect kingdom. On that fateful Christmas, 2 hearts would break, a long-held friendship would shatter, and a tragedy would unfold that even vast wealth and influence could not prevent. Beneath the layers of fresh snow and beneath the carefully arranged tinsel, a darkness loomed, one that no Christmas carol or gala invitation could keep at bay. This is the story of Jared Harrington, billionaire entrepreneur who broke the vows he once swore to cherish, and Catherine Harrington, the refined philanthropist and beloved hostess who discovered the truth and waged an internal war for her dignity and future. This is also the story of Celeste Farnsworth, Catherine's friend, who, in a moment of envy and passion, betrayed a sacred bond. Here, in these quiet hills upstate, ambition and desire collided, and a once golden marriage teetered on the brink. From the outside, the Harrington mansion exuded old-world elegance. The main structure, built of limestone and crowned with slender spires, was reminiscent of a European chateau. Grand windows offered glimpses of the opulent interior. Vaulted ceilings, tapestries from 17th century France, and marble floors polished to a reflective sheen. Jared Harrington had built his fortune on the back of a tech startup founded barely a decade ago. Back then, he was just a determined graduate with a knack for coding, but he possessed a restless vision that many found magnetic. He told peers at Stanford, where he briefly studied for an MBA, that he wanted to revolutionize the way people shopped and donated online. He was part of the entrepreneurial wave that included the likes of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, though few outside the insider circles recognized Jared's name at first. Within years, he soared past the billion-dollar mark, balancing e-commerce expansions with philanthropic partnerships. Catherine Harrington, née Prescott, was Jared's anchor in the early days. Raised in a modest household near Boston, she had earned full scholarships for her undergraduate and master's degrees in international relations. She met Jared at a conference on global entrepreneurship. His confidence and sheer passion for problem-solving intrigued her, while her calm intelligence and empathetic nature grounded him. Their courtship was a harmonious blend of late-night coding sprees and philanthropic brainstorming, culminating in a proposal at a fundraiser for childhood education, an event Catherine had coordinated and Jared had financed. In the early years of their marriage, the couple seemed unstoppable. Catherine led the charitable arm of Harrington Industries, establishing scholarship funds and forging alliances with major global foundations. She collaborated with luminaries like Bill and Melinda Gates, ensuring that a portion of the Harrington fortune went directly to underfunded schools in Southeast Asia and rural Africa. Jared, meanwhile, tackled the relentless corporate expansion, eventually acquiring international shipping routes and forging alliances with green energy innovators. But as Harrington Industries blossomed, so did Jared's hunger for more money, more power, more accolades. The quiet synergy that once defined their relationship began to fray. Catherine remained devoted to charitable pursuits, preferring behind-the-scenes work that made tangible differences in people's lives. Jared, starstruck by the game of corporate supremacy, became enthralled by the high-stakes deals, rubbing shoulders with media moguls and private equity giants. They still shared the same bed, the same splendid house, the same philanthropic mission statements on paper. Yet the intangible closeness of their early years was fading. Catherine felt it in the way Jared no longer kissed her goodnight with genuine warmth, or how he cancelled her carefully arranged dinners to seal last-minute deals in Tokyo or Berlin. And then came Celeste Farnsworth. She had been one of Catherine's college friends at Wellesley, charismatic, free-spirited, always chasing the next lavish party or social connection. Celeste was the kind of woman who could hold a room's attention with her laughter. And in her youth she had modelled briefly in New York. Over the years she drifted in and out of Catherine's life, leaning on her friend for moral and financial support when times grew tough. At first, Celeste's reappearance seemed an innocuous request for help. She needed a place to stay temporarily while she settled an inheritance dispute and looked for a new apartment in Manhattan. Catherine, ever generous, offered her the estate's guest wing. It was meant to be a short-term solution, just until Celeste got back on her feet. Neither Catherine nor Jared suspected that Celeste's presence would be the lit match that ignited an already smouldering tension. As December rolled in, the Harrington estate transformed into a glittering wonderland. Catherine worked closely with the household staff, led by Mrs. Jefferson, the head housekeeper, to decorate every corridor with garlands of holly and velvet ribbons. White and gold lights glimmered on every tree lining the driveway. An enormous wreath, studded with magnolia leaves and pine cones, adorned the front door. Catherine poured her heart into this year's Christmas preparations. She believed in the magic of the season, the possibility of bringing people together. She especially cherished the annual charity gala they hosted, with ticket sales benefiting literacy programs in underprivileged communities. Dozens of VIPs were slated to attend, corporate CEOs, philanthropic leaders, and even a rumored visit from a close associate of Oprah Winfrey who was scouting for new charitable alliances. Yet, beneath Catherine's holiday cheer lay a gnawing sense of unease. Jared had been away more often than usual, short trips to Los Angeles, Dubai, Beijing, always accompanied by a new set of advisors. When he was home, he radiated tension. She could see it in the way he drummed his fingers on the breakfast table, or how he answered her questions with half-hearted nods, mind clearly elsewhere. Celeste tried to be a comforting presence, or so it seemed. She often stayed up late with Catherine, sipping mulled wine by the fireplace, listening to Catherine's concerns about Jared. She would stroke Catherine's hair and say things like, "He's always been a workaholic, darling. Maybe he just needs a break." But sometimes Celeste asked probing questions about the empire's finances or the upcoming expansions Harrington Industries had planned. Her curiosity struck Catherine as odd, but she brushed it off. Celeste was inquisitive by nature, and perhaps she was simply enthralled by the millionaire-billionaire world she'd never fully inhabited before. 2 weeks before Christmas, Jared finally returned to the estate, accompanied by a swirl of stuffers and luggage. Catherine greeted him at the foyer, forcibly cheerful. "Welcome home," she said, pressing a light kiss to his cheek. He gave a tight smile. "Good to be back. Is everything set for the gala?" "It's on track. The menu is finalized. We have Chef Thomas Keller from New York bringing in a specialized team to handle the main courses." Jared's eyes skimmed over the elaborate holiday decor, his mind elsewhere. Great, that's great. He handed his coat to an attendant and glanced behind him at his personal assistant, who was rattling off details about a shipping deal. I need to deal with some calls, Catherine. Can we catch up later? Sure, she said softly, watching him disappear down the corridor toward his study. That evening, Catherine found Celeste lounging in the living room with a glass of champagne, wearing a silken robe that seemed a bit too casual for a house guest. How was Jared's return? Celeste asked, feigning innocence. Catherine sighed, settling onto a nearby armchair. He's so distant. It's like... I don't know. It's like living with a stranger some days. Celeste took a sip of her drink. Her gaze flickered. Have you tried talking to him about it? Many times, Catherine replied, massaging her temples. He just brushes me off or claims I'm overthinking. But I can't shake this feeling that something's wrong, whether it's a business crisis or, she paused, unwilling to voice her deeper fear, or someone else. Celeste simply reached over and squeezed Catherine's hand. Don't torment yourself, love. Maybe after the gala you two can take a trip, reconnect. He's not one to resist your thoughtful planning. Catherine offered a grateful smile. Maybe. But late that night, as she lay awake, listening to the faint hum of wind against the manor's stone walls, Catherine couldn't find solace. She prayed that the upcoming Christmas celebrations would rekindle warmth in their home. She had no idea that the next few days would make her carefully orchestrated festivities seem like a fragile veneer over a marriage on the brink of collapse. The night of the Harrington Charity Gala arrived. Snow drifted lazily outside, blanketing the lawns and reflecting the warm glow of the mansion's lights. Valets guided sleek cars up the long driveway, opening doors for socialites and corporate magnates draped in designer coats. Inside the foyer, a massive evergreen tree, decorated with crystal ornaments and gold ribbons, towered over arriving guests. The soft strains of a string quartet floated through the halls. White-gloved waiters passed flutes of vintage champagne, while Chef Thomas Keller's team prepared an array of gourmet hors d'oeuvres, from lobster canapés to foie gras terrine. Catherine, in a midnight blue velvet gown, moved gracefully among the attendees. She greeted old friends from philanthropic circles, introduced new acquaintances to her board members, and flashed a welcoming smile at the cameras. She was the embodiment of poise, yet beneath her polished exterior, her nerves were frayed. Her eyes flicked constantly toward Jared, who was immersed in conversation with a group of venture capitalists. Jared looked dashing in a tailored tuxedo, though he wore a perpetually distracted expression. Occasionally, Catherine noticed him scanning the crowd, as if searching for someone. Did he look bored, or simply impatient for the night to be over so he could finalize some overseas negotiation? The air smelled of roses and pine, the quintessential holiday aroma. Catherine's sister, Hannah, who worked in public relations, was there to handle the press. She leaned in to whisper updates to Catherine about which journalists had arrived, which donors were most enthusiastic, and which big-name philanthropists might need extra attention. Celeste was present as well, wearing a shimmering emerald dress that hugged her figure in a manner that drew side glances from some of the men and a few women at the party. Catherine noticed that Celeste and Jared seemed to cross paths a bit too often throughout the evening. Their interactions were subtle, an exchange of whispers near the fireplace, a mutual laugh that seemed more conspiratorial than innocent. Catherine tried to dismiss the worry as paranoia, focusing instead on the event's success. After dinner, the guests gathered in the ballroom, where an auction would be held to raise money for a new set of international literacy programs. Catherine stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand, and offered a speech that was equal parts inspiring and heartfelt. She spoke about the power of education to transform lives, the significance of each donation, and the Harrington Foundation's commitment to transparency and impact. Applause thundered when she finished, cameras flashing in the overhead lights. Jared joined her on stage briefly, adding a few words about how proud he was of Catherine's work. Yet even during his public praise, Catherine sensed an underlying tension in his posture. Something weighed on him, something he wouldn't share. The auction proceeded brilliantly, with items ranging from exclusive art pieces by celebrated painters to once-in-a-lifetime experiences, like a private dinner cooked by Chef Keller in the winner's own home. When the final tally came in, the crowd erupted into cheers. The night had raised over $4 million for literacy programs. After the celebratory toast, Catherine quietly slipped out to catch her breath. She retreated to the mansion's gallery, where family portraits and expensive artwork lined the walls. The lighting was dim, the hallway silent, and that's when she heard hushed voices around the corner, a man and a woman, murmuring urgently. She recognized Jared's low baritone, tense and insistent, followed by Celeste's breathy reply. Heart pounding, Catherine peered cautiously around the corner. There, under the faint glow of a single wall sconce, stood Jared and Celeste, their heads inclined toward each other in intimate proximity. Celeste's manicured hand rested on Jared's lapel, and his expression suggested a conflict of emotion Catherine couldn't fully decipher. Her breath caught. Could it be innocent, or was it the confirmation of every doubt she'd tried to suppress? Steeling herself, Catherine decided not to confront them then and there. Instead, she swallowed her shock, wiped away a threatening tear, and quietly retreated. Tonight was not the night to cause a scene. Tonight, she had a role to play, the gracious hostess, the philanthropic leader, but inside her chest, something fragile had already begun to crack. The gala ended in a whirl of limousines and final handshakes. Guests departed with smiles and well wishes, praising Catherine for her impeccable hospitality. Despite the night's public triumph, Catherine felt hollow inside. After seeing off the last of the attendees, she slipped out of her heels and ascended the sweeping staircase to the second floor. She glanced down the corridor that led to the master bedroom, half expecting to see Jared waiting for her. But the corridor was dark, silent. She found him eventually in his private study, hunched over a laptop, tie undone, whiskey glass by his side. The warm glow of a Tiffany lamp illuminated his face, revealing lines of fatigue and something else, guilt, perhaps, or fear. She paused at the threshold. "Long day," she said softly. He jerked upright, shutting the laptop as though caught in a misdeed. "Catherine, yes, it's been quite a day." She took a step into the room, folding her arms protectively. "The gala went well, over $4 million raised." He nodded. "That's wonderful news." Silence stretched between them, punctuated by the ticking of a brass clock on the desk. Catherine noticed the stack of documents near Jared's laptop acquisition papers from one of his companies, judging by the logos. He was always working, even now, past midnight. A swirl of conflicting emotions surged in Catherine's chest. She wanted to ask him about Celeste, about the furtive looks, the whispered conversation in the corridor. Instead, she forced a neutral tone. "Is Celeste still awake?" Jared stiffened, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "I wouldn't know. She left for her room a while ago." Catherine licked her lips, her composure unraveling. She could no longer hold back. "I saw you two earlier. You looked close." He exhaled, a defensive edge entering his voice. She wanted some advice about an investment opportunity, nothing more. Is that really all it was? He kept his gaze averted, sipping the whiskey. The silence was answer enough. A lump formed in Catherine's throat. She needed proof. She needed to face her fear head-on. Without another word, she turned on her heel and left. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the image of Celeste's hand on Jared's chest, the intensity in his eyes. She felt as though a dark tide was rising, threatening to engulf her. In the darkest hours before dawn, she made a decision. Quietly, she slipped into Jared's study. Under normal circumstances, she would never violate his privacy, but desperation drove her. She booted up his laptop, heart pounding so hard she could barely see straight. The screen asked for a password. She tried one of the standard variations, the name of his startup plus a numeric code. It worked. His email inbox glowed on the screen, subject lines about corporate mergers and overseas expansions, but near the top, a name leapt out at her: Celeste Farnsworth. She hesitated, tears already threatening to cloud her vision, and clicked. The message thread was short but damning. Celeste had been sending Jared flirty messages, referencing secret rendezvous, including lines like, "I can't stop thinking about last weekend." In one, Jared replied that he'd be more discreet going forward, signing off with a single initial J. Catherine read the chain once, twice, her hands shaking. All her suspicions, every unspoken dread, had crystallized into a brutal fact. Jared Harrington, her husband, partner, confidant, was having an affair with her closest friend. A stifled sob escaped her throat. She closed the laptop, tears streaking her face. The reality was more devastating than any nightmare she could have conjured. She stumbled back to her room and locked the door, struggling to breathe through her anguish. By the faint moonlight, she opened the drawer of her vanity and pulled out a plain manila folder she had secretly prepared weeks ago. Divorce documents, incomplete, but far enough along to put everything into motion if needed. The next morning, she would call her lawyer. The question was no longer if she'd end her marriage, but how. Dawn broke over the Harrington estate in pastel hues of pink and gold, the snow sparkling like diamonds on the lawn. Inside, however, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Catherine awoke from a fitful sleep, her eyes gritty with tears. She stared at the divorce papers spread across her vanity, thinking about what they represented, the end of a chapter she had once believed would last forever. Before she could dwell further, she heard a brisk knock on her door. Jared's voice came through the wood. "Catherine, can we talk? Please." Every muscle in her body tensed. Drawing a shaky breath, she stood, pulled on a robe, and opened the door a crack. "What is it?" He was dressed casually in a sweater and slacks, dark circles under his eyes. "I know something's wrong. You've been avoiding me since last night." Catherine stepped aside, allowing him to enter. She folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, something's very wrong." He looked around, noticing the folder on the vanity. His face paled. "What's that?" "Proof of how serious I am," Catherine replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "I know about you and Celeste. I saw the emails." Jared froze, eyes widening. His defensive posture faltered. "Catherine, let me—" She cut him off, holding up a hand. "How long?" He swallowed, glancing at the floor. "A few months." Her heart twisted painfully. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of nausea through her. "Is that why you've been so distant? The business trips, the late nights?" He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I never wanted it to go this far." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Why, Jared? Why with her? You know what she means to me, or what she used to mean to me." He raked a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt warring on his face. "She was here. We were both lonely, and things got complicated." A bitter laugh escaped Catherine's lips. "Lonely? You have me, Jared. I've been here, waiting, worrying, supporting you." He tried to reach for her hand, but she stepped back. "Don't," she warned, her voice shaking with anger. Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Outside, a distant snowplow rumbled by on the estate's main drive, the only sound in an otherwise frozen moment. At last, Catherine gestured to the folder. "These are divorce papers. They're not fully finalized, but they can be soon. I'm done pretending we're a happy couple." His eyes moistened with alarm. "Catherine, I can't lose you. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but I still love you." She shook her head slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't betray someone you love like this." A knock on the doorframe startled them both. Celeste stood there, hair disheveled, wearing a satin dressing gown. Her expression was a mix of fear and contrition. "Catherine," she began, voice trembling, "I'm sorry. Please, let me explain." Red-hot fury flared in Catherine. "No," she snapped. "Get out of my house." Celeste's eyes brimmed with tears. "I'll pack my things, but get out." Catherine's voice cracked and she pointed to the door. Celeste turned and fled, leaving Jared and Catherine in the suffocating aftermath of shattered trust. "I'll end it with her, Catherine," Jared pleaded, tears glistening in his own eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." She stared at him, heart pounding. "You already ended everything that mattered," she whispered. "Leave me alone. I need time." Jared lingered for a moment, as though hoping she might relent, then slowly walked out of the room. Catherine locked the door behind him and slid to the floor, hugging her knees as sobs racked her body. In that silent bedroom, the future she had once cherished lay in pieces around her. In the days following the confrontation, the mansion became an echo chamber of unspoken anguish. Celeste left that very afternoon. Catherine had one of the chauffeurs drive her to a nearby luxury hotel. By sunset, Celeste's suitcases and perfume-scented presents were gone, leaving behind only the faint memory of her betrayal. Catherine threw herself into philanthropic work to stave off the heartbreak. She made phone calls to her contacts at UNICEF, hammered out new scholarship initiatives, and arranged a visit to a local women's shelter to drop off holiday donations. Anything to avoid the suffocating reality of her personal life. Jared tried, in his own fumbling way, to atone. He cancelled a trip to Berlin, telling Catherine he wanted to be around if she needed him. He sent her texts asking how she was feeling, if she needed anything, often receiving only curt replies or none at all. At dinner, he'd linger at the large mahogany table, waiting for her to speak, but Catherine would eat quietly and leave without a word. One particularly frigid evening, she stood by the windows of the gallery, staring at the leafless trees in the courtyard. The white lights that had once filled her with holiday joy now seemed cold and mocking. Jared approached cautiously. "Catherine, there's something we need to address." She kept her gaze on the window. "What?" He swallowed, then gestured to the estate around them. "Our finances are intertwined, and we both know a divorce would make headlines. Especially after the success of the gala." She turned, leveling him with a cool stare. "Your point." His expression was weary, guilt-ridden. "I just want to handle things respectfully. If we're going down that path, maybe we can settle this quietly. Work out a fair division of assets, keep the foundation intact for the beneficiaries." A wave of sadness washed over Catherine. She realized how entangled their worlds were, how many philanthropic campaigns bore the Harrington name, how many board seats they shared. "If you're worried about your public image, I can assure you I won't sabotage you." He took a hesitant step closer. "It's not just the image, it's everything we built together. I don't want to destroy it." She sighed, pressing her palm to the cold glass. "The problem is, you already did." In the weeks that followed, lawyers were quietly consulted. Catherine's attorney was a long-time family friend, discreet and fiercely protective. Jared employed a high-profile legal team known for handling celebrity divorces and hush-hush settlements. Yet even with all the NDAs and confidentiality clauses, rumors leaked. A small business gossip website posted a speculative article titled, "Trouble in the Harrington Kingdom?" It cited sources close to the family, who mentioned tension between Jared and Catherine after the gala. Catherine felt humiliated. She prided herself on maintaining her integrity and privacy, yet here she was, the subject of rumors. In response, she withdrew from social events, focusing on finalizing the future structure of her philanthropic endeavors. She wanted to protect the foundation from the fallout of a messy divorce. One morning, Catherine's sister Hannah came to visit. They sat in the sunroom, the winter light weakly filtering through the glass ceiling. Catherine recounted the affair in hushed tones, tears creeping into her eyes as she relived the betrayal. Hannah took her hand gently. You deserve better, Catty. Whether that means rebuilding your marriage or walking away, only you can decide." Catherine stared at her reflection in the glass. She barely recognized the woman looking back, a woman stripped of certainty, carrying a scar no opulent Christmas cheer could conceal. Despite the heartbreak that lingered in every corner of the estate, the Harrington mansion could not escape the arrival of Christmas Eve. Snow fell in thick flakes, piling into drifts around the hedges and statuary. The fireplace in the main living room crackled with warmth, though it felt like an eerie counterpoint to the chill between Catherine and Jared. Normally, Christmas Eve at the Harrington estate was a joyous affair. Family gatherings, close friends, a lavish dinner followed by carols around the grand piano. This year, Catherine cancelled the usual celebration, claiming she was still exhausted from the gala. Most staff were given the night off to spend with their own families. Only a skeleton crew remained, ensuring the mansion's basic functions continued. Catherine spent the day organizing gifts for local charities, personally labeling each package. She found fleeting solace in the act of giving. At least that part of her identity remained uncompromised. She tried to ignore the memories of past Christmas Eves, when she and Jared would wrap presents together, sipping mulled wine and stealing kisses under the mistletoe. At around 6 in the evening, she heard a soft knock on the parlor door. Jared stood there, wearing a grey sweater, looking far from the polished billionaire persona he usually projected. "Catherine," he said quietly, "will you at least sit with me for dinner? We can have something simple, no fuss." A part of her wanted to reject him outright, but another part, tired, longing for the days of normalcy, relented. She nodded and followed him to the small dining room. The staff had laid out a modest meal of roasted chicken, seasonal vegetables, and fresh bread. No centerpiece, no silver candelabras, just 2 plates and a pitcher of water. It felt unnervingly intimate. They ate mostly in silence. The tension in the air made the simple meal taste bland. The only conversation revolved around the upcoming finalization of documents to create a separate philanthropic arm for Catherine, ensuring that if the divorce went public, her projects would remain unaffected. After dinner, Jared cleared his throat. The staff put up a smaller tree in the library. "I was thinking, maybe we could open at least one present. It's still Christmas Eve." Catherine regarded him with weary eyes. "A present?" He nodded, almost shyly. "Just a small token. It might not mean much, but it's something I wanted you to have." Curiosity and old sentiment tugged at her. Against her better judgment, she followed him into the library. Indeed, a small spruce, barely 5 feet tall, stood in the corner, adorned with simple white lights and a single gold star at the top. Beneath it lay a gift-wrapped box. Jared picked it up and handed it to her, stepping back as if worried any closer movement might shatter the fragile truce. Catherine carefully unwrapped it, revealing a first-edition volume of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Her breath caught. She'd once mentioned how much she loved Browning's sonnets in college, but never owned a first edition. She ran her fingers over the leather binding. "You remembered," she whispered, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. He forced a small smile. "I remember everything about you, Catherine." For a moment, raw emotion flared between them, nostalgia, regret, a glimmer of what once was. Then the memory of his betrayal rushed in, severing the moment. Catherine shut the book gently, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she managed. "It's beautiful." She rose, setting the book on a side table. "I'm tired. I think I'll turn in for the night." Without waiting for a reply, she left the library. Behind her, Jared stood by the little Christmas tree, his shoulders slumped as the silent mansion echoed with their unresolved anguish. Midnight approached, and a fierce wind rattled the windows. Catherine tossed in bed, sleep impossible. Eventually she rose, wrapping herself in a thick robe. The emptiness of her bed underscored the emptiness in her soul. She wandered the hallways, passing portraits of long-deceased Harrington ancestors and ornate vases filled with winter flowers. Something drew her toward the east wing, where the solarium overlooked the snow-laden gardens. She wanted a glimpse of the moonlit landscape, perhaps a moment of clarity amid the turmoil in her heart. The solarium was a glass-walled extension with a panoramic view of the estate's grounds. As Catherine stepped inside, the moonlight illuminated the frosted panes, revealing the swirling snow outside. The hush of the night was profound, broken only by the faint whistle of wind. She approached the large double doors that opened onto a stone balcony. The cold air outside was biting, but she felt a need to step out, to feel something real and bracing against her skin. Carefully, she unlocked the doors and pushed them open. A gust of icy air rushed in, stinging her cheeks. She stepped onto the balcony, hugging her robe tight. Below, the gardens were a sea of white, statues half buried in snowdrifts. She took a shaky breath, tears welling again. Suddenly, footsteps sounded behind her. She spun, startled, and saw Jared at the threshold. He wore a heavy coat over his pajamas, concern etched into his features. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, voice tense with worry. Catherine turned away, looking back at the winter vista. "I couldn't sleep." He stepped onto the balcony, shutting the doors behind him to keep the wind from howling into the solarium. "It's freezing. You'll catch a chill." She gave a hollow laugh. "Since when do you care?" "I've always cared," he said quietly. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you." She stared at him, her eyes swimming with tears she was too proud to release. "That's an understatement." They stood there, two lonely figures against the backdrop of a cold, moonlit sky. Snow whipped around them, swirling in turbulent gusts. "I never wanted this," Jared said, voice cracking. "I got lost in the excitement, the power, and I lost sight of us." Catherine shook her head, stepping closer to the railing. "It's not just the betrayal. It's the emptiness, Jared. We used to be partners. Now I can't even recognize you or myself." Tears finally broke from her eyes, freezing on her lashes in the bitter wind. She gripped the balcony's stone ledge, dizzy with heartbreak. Jared moved as if to comfort her, but she jerked away, stepping precariously near the railing's edge. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind rattled the structure. The stone was slick with ice. Catherine's foot slipped, and a sharp jolt of panic shot through her. She fought to regain her balance, but the momentum carried her backward, and she toppled over the railing. For a split second, she hung suspended in midair, the shock in Jared's eyes reflecting her own terror. Then she plunged downward, the world an icy blur. She hit a thick snowbank below, but not without a sickening impact. Pain exploded through her body, and her vision dimmed. Over the howling wind, she faintly heard Jared's scream echo from the balcony. Darkness closed in, the taste of blood filling her mouth, and for a horrifying moment, Catherine thought she might die there in the cold, alone, under the midnight sky. The next days were a blur of hospital corridors, hushed medical conversations, and the mechanical beep of monitors. Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness, her world reduced to throbbing pain and fleeting dreams. When she finally stabilized, she found herself in a private suite at a state-of-the-art hospital in Manhattan. The room overlooked the distant cityscape, swirling snow still visible beyond the glass. An IV line snaked into her arm, and her torso was wrapped in bandages. A soft knock at the door. She turned her head, wincing at the pain in her neck. Jared entered, wearing a rumpled suit, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. He approached her bedside tentatively, as though fearing she might lash out at him. She tried to speak, but her throat felt raw. He offered a cup of water with a straw, and she sipped it gratefully. "You've been out for 2 days," he explained, voice trembling with relief. "Your injuries, a fractured rib, a broken ankle, a concussion, but the doctors say you'll recover fully with time." She stared at him, memories of the balcony returning in flashes. She recalled the moment her foot slipped, the helpless freefall, the crushing impact, but she also remembered the heartbreak that led her there in the first place. Where are my parents?" she managed. "They're on their way," Jared said. "Your sister's been here too. She stepped out for coffee." Silence enveloped them, broken only by the distant hum of hospital machinery. Catherine felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: gratitude for being alive, resentment that Jared was the one by her side, guilt for how everything had spiraled. Her eyes flicked to the door. "You don't have to stay." He shook his head, tears brimming. "I want to. I've barely left this room. I almost lost you, Catherine." She forced her gaze away, staring at the muted TV screen mounted on the wall. A news channel played, discussing holiday travel chaos. Life outside continued, oblivious to her internal storm. Over the following days, her family visited. Hannah fussed over Catherine, bringing fresh flowers and a comforting presence. Their parents, having flown in from Boston, offered tearful hugs and homemade soup. Jared remained a constant figure, stepping out only when doctors needed privacy to examine Catherine, or when she asked for space to speak with her family alone. One afternoon, while Catherine dozed, she woke to find Jared quietly talking to Dr. Reinhardt, one of the hospital's top orthopedic surgeons. "I'll make sure the necessary equipment is brought to the estate," Jared was saying. "She'll have the best possible care at home." When the doctor left, Catherine managed to speak. "Equipment? Estate?" Jared moved closer, hands in his pockets. "They'll discharge you in a week or so if your recovery stays on track. We can set up a private room for you in the mansion, wheelchair ramps, anything you need." A bitter part of her wanted to say she'd rather stay anywhere else, but she also knew the estate was her home. With her injuries, it made sense to have space, staff and resources at her disposal. She nodded slowly, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "All right." He exhaled, relief evident. "I promise I'll give you space. I'll move to a separate wing if that's what you want." She closed her eyes, exhaustion overwhelming her. "I just want to heal," she whispered. In the quiet that followed, she drifted back into a fitful sleep, uncertain whether she meant physical healing alone or the deeper healing that might never come. The new year arrived, heralding a cautious sense of renewal for many. For Catherine, it was marked by a painful ambulance ride back to the estate. She was strapped to a special gurney for her fractured ankle and supported by pillows for her ribs. A nurse accompanied her to ensure there were no complications. The once vibrant Christmas decorations had been taken down, leaving the Harrington mansion oddly stark. Jared had instructed the staff to remove everything, hoping to spare Catherine any painful reminders of the holiday tragedy. The air felt heavy, though, as if the ghosts of that night still lingered in the corridors. With the help of a physical therapist, Catherine began a slow path to recovery. She spent hours in bed reading or in a wheelchair near the library's windows, watching the snow melt day by day. Winter sun glinted on the icicles that dripped from the eaves, each drop a tiny measure of time passing. Jared kept his promise to give her space. He moved to a guest suite on the opposite side of the mansion. His presence in the house was subtle. She'd catch glimpses of him in the kitchen at odd hours, or see his car leave for a business meeting. Still, she heard from staff that he'd drastically cut back on travel, insisting he be nearby for Catherine's sake. About 3 weeks into her home recovery, Catherine asked her nurse to help her into the parlor, where she practiced walking short distances with a cane. She heard subdued piano music, drifting from the main living room, a familiar melody. Curiosity piqued. She made her way there, leaning on her cane for support. She found Jared sitting at the grand piano, playing one of the classical pieces Catherine used to love Clair de Lune by Debussy. His skill was rudimentary, clearly out of practice, but the melody was unmistakable. He looked up, startled, when he noticed her. "Catherine, I'm sorry if I disturbed you," he stammered, taking his hands off the keys. She shook her head. "No, it's fine. I just haven't heard you play in so long." He stood, moving aside the piano bench as if offering her a seat. She hesitated, then approached, sinking onto the bench beside him. Memories washed over her. They used to play together when they first married, her hands dancing across the higher octaves while he handled the chords. They sat in a charged silence, the faint echo of Debussy still lingering in the air. Finally, Jared spoke. "How's the pain today?" She shrugged, still not meeting his eyes. Bearable. Physical therapy's tough, but I'm managing. He nodded, exhaling softly. I'm glad. A part of her wanted to ask if he was still in touch with Celeste, if he truly regretted the affair, if there was any chance they could salvage the wreckage of their marriage. Another part bristled, demanding she not show him any more vulnerability. In the end, she only said, I've been thinking about the divorce. His hands tensed on his lap. And? She stared at the piano keys, tracing them lightly with her fingers. I'm still angry. I still feel betrayed. But the truth is, I'm also confused. She turned toward him, tears pooling in her eyes. You've been here, taking care of me, cancelling trips. You seem like the man I married, and yet I can't forget what you did. His voice wavered. I'd do anything to make this right. I know I broke your trust. It kills me every day. Silence fell, interrupted only by the distant sound of a housekeeper vacuuming in another wing. At length, Catherine inhaled shakily. I'm not ready to let go completely, but I'm not ready to forgive you either. Jared nodded, swallowing. I understand. She closed the piano lid gently. My lawyer has the papers. I won't sign them yet. We'll try. Couples therapy, maybe. We'll reevaluate in 6 months. If I still can't trust you, I'll file the divorce then. Relief, gratitude, and sorrow mingled on his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance. Their eyes met, a fragile bridge spanning the chasm of betrayal. For the first time since the accident, Catherine let herself hope just a little that perhaps something might still bloom from the frozen ground of their shattered lives. As the Hudson Valley's winter thawed into early spring, soft rains replaced the snowfall. The gardens began to wake, patches of green emerging amidst the muddy remnants of snowdrifts. Birds returned, their chirping a gentle promise of renewal. Inside the Harrington estate, Catherine continued her slow, determined recovery. She still walked with a cane, though her therapist predicted she'd be free of it by late spring. Emotionally, she felt the same tentative steps taking place. She and Jared attended weekly counseling sessions with a renowned therapist, Dr. Angela Rice, who guided them in painfully honest conversations about what they'd lost and what might be reclaimed. Celeste Farnsworth never contacted Catherine again. Word reached Catherine through a mutual acquaintance that Celeste had taken a long trip to Europe, possibly to avoid public scrutiny. Catherine tried to stop thinking about her, focusing instead on her own path forward. The philanthropic foundation remained a joint endeavor, each new project a reminder of the good they could still accomplish. Donations continued to flow, and Catherine immersed herself in overseeing the distribution of funds, ensuring transparency and impact. Jared scaled back some expansions, delegated more to trusted executives, and devoted time to introspection. There were days Catherine found Jared in the library, his head bowed over a book of poetry, wearing the same expression he once had in their early years, curiosity tempered by humility. Sometimes they'd talk about mundane things, updates on the foundation, changes to the estate's staff. On rare occasions, they'd laugh about a shared memory, yet the spectre of betrayal lingered, an unspoken caution that trust was not easily rebuilt. For Catherine, resilience became her guiding star. She learned she could be both vulnerable and strong, devastated, yet unbroken. And for Jared, humility replaced his old hubris. He had clawed his way to billionaire status, only to realize that the real treasure had been a loving partner who supported him when he was just a dreamer with a vision. Whether they could truly rebuild a new, more authentic bond remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. In the aftermath of betrayal, heartbreak, and tragedy, they had each discovered uncharted depths within themselves, and perhaps that was the first step toward a better, if bittersweet, tomorrow.